everyone. I'm Steve here again with our weekly interview with Dr. Nario. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Nario.
Hi, Steve. Thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure.
Okay, so we're going to talk about diabetes, type 1, type 2, some differences, and I have some questions for the doctor on diabetes. But if you're looking to learn more about Dr. Nario and Biointegrative Health Center in Reno, you can look them up online. Really easy. You can see the treatments they do. You can get contact information right there on their website. So let's get into diabetes. What is diabetes, doctor?
Well, Steve, again, the diabetes has so many definitions out there. You just type it, you're going to get what diabetes is. But defined by our favorite doctor, Dr. Google or Dr. Wikipedia, it's a metabolic disease in which there is high blood sugar levels over a prolonged period of time. So, but as you understand this, this is not medically expounded on. Later on, it's very vague. We're going to expound on this. And again, this is something that I always kind of hear as an understanding. But in the medical sense, how we understand diabetes is we actually diagnose it through a test, meaning series of tests. It's before in the old days, people used to pee on the ground, and when they see ants crawling on their pee, there you go. That's diabetes. We don't do that anymore.
So
We're not
when was that? Was that in the dark ages or
like
something?
3 days ago. No, I'm kidding.
3 days ago.
No, yeah, that was like before. Is it? I think it's 1700s, 1800s.
Yeah.
It's way back when they don't have these complicated machines. But again, now we're using actually, yeah, laboratory machines, and for fasting glucose, we always want it to be around 80. Anything higher than 80, it's not bad. You would see labs saying it's the cutoff is around 120, but 80 is our cutoff for me, because that every time you go up to 80, not only are you going to develop sugar problems, but also cardiovascular issues. So another test that we do is hemoglobin A1C. So this is very popular and it shows 3 months worth of your blood sugar. So this one, oh, it's high because I ate yesterday. Nope, that's not related to that. This is your reflection for 3 months. So there's no kind of sneaking your way out of hemoglobin A1C. And that's why the cutoff usually is anything higher than 6.5 will be diabetes. And there's pre-diabetes now, so which I always emphasize, which is 5.7 to 6.4. And again, there's another oral glucose tolerance test, which is a more accurate test, but it's not used a lot because there's so much involved with it. In the lab, they're going to make you drink sugar water. You need to go back to the lab after a few hours. So that one, we're probably not going to discuss that today, but just wanted to give everybody an idea on how we diagnose diabetes.
Okay, that's great. And from the layman, me, like I checked my glucose this morning, it was about 83. Now, it's
Mhm.
interesting. You said you want it to be 80, but what you're
Mhm.
looking for when you say 80 is ideal,
Yeah.
really metabolic healthy. Because
Yes.
if you come in at 98, you're normal, but you're
Mhm.
not as metabolic healthy as if it comes in at 80, correct?
Right. So this is what we call or termed optimal. So
Yes.
this is something that there's a range, but we want it to be like this because we want to really set the bar high for our patients in terms of preventative care.
Sure. Yeah. It's like, you take the scale of weird, you're only this weird or you're really weird. Well, if you're
Sure.
in the normal weird scale, you're still weird, but just how weird are you? So,
True. That's a good way to state that.
right. Okay. So now there's type 1 and there's type 2 diabetes.
Hmm.
I used a term kind of before we got on here. You could kind of say that type 2 is maybe self induced. I'm
Right.
not going to say all the time because, everyone's different. But can you tell us what the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes is?
Well, Steve, type 1 is what we call insulin dependent diabetes. This is when the pancreas fails to produce enough insulin, and usually it presents during childhood. And that's why it's called it's childhood diabetes as well. And type 2 diabetes is what we call adult onset diabetes or start of insulin resistance. That is the heart of that disease. When cells fail to respond to insulin to let glucose inside the cell for utilization. And progression of this type of disease is again related to insulin issues. And the thing here is when you talk about sugar overload from food, being overweight, lack of exercise, these are the usual causes of type 2 diabetes. And again, as you can see, self induced, right? And gestational diabetes, as I mentioned to you, is something off the topic today, but that's also one when you develop diabetes when you are pregnant. The thing here is there are two new arising types of diabetes now. So, diabetes type 1.5. So, why is 1.5 there? Because it's in the middle of 1 and 2 when adults actually starts to develop autoimmune conditions that eats up the cells of the pancreas. So this is something now that will actually be related to the treatment of type 1 being applied now to type 2 patients. So this is a mixture of autoimmune and also basically induced by the patient. Another type that is arising also is type 3 diabetes. So type 3 diabetes is now related to what we call Alzheimer's disease. So as we know, brain uses carbohydrates as its food to power it up. But since diabetes or insulin resistance is occurring in the brain, now it cannot use that sugar for its utilization. Thus, one of the theories, one of the bigger contributors of Alzheimer's disease. So, going back to the most common one, type 2, is always what we call, again, sometimes we blame it on genes, but not really. It's really more of because people are starting to eat the SAD diet, the standard American diet, which actually has a lot of fatty acids, carbohydrates, and this leads to what we call the insulin resistance, which covers the receptors of the cells to produce higher blood glucose. But again, rubbing out on everybody's attention, it's induced by our diets and lifestyle.
So you answered another question I was going to ask. I mean, and that's very interesting because now this, I just want to make sure I'm understanding what you're saying. So type 1 is when your pancreas is not producing insulin. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Because of autoimmune
Right.
conditions that
That's
probably when you were
what
younger.
I was going to ask because that's usually at a younger age. But you just said this can be developed at an older age. If someone has an autoimmune disease, that can cause their pancreas to stop producing insulin. So, therefore, we call it diabetes 1.5.
That is correct. Well, Steve, here's the thing. It's not only when you have autoimmune diseases, it's actually when you develop an autoimmune response because of what is going on with your body. For example, now we are getting exposed to so many chemicals, so many types of foods that we don't like, so many harsh environmental toxins. So, as we now develop these autoimmune reactions, the pancreas gets affected as well. So, this is now becoming, oh, it's developing, never had diabetes, but now starting to have this autoimmune response that kills your pancreas, thus forming into 1.5.
Wow, the standard American diet's got to go, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, well, it's everybody's it's on everybody's hit list when you
Yeah.
talk about integrative
I
doctors.
don't see it going anywhere, though, with all the drive up fast food.
Right, right.
That's
Unfortunately,
very interesting. So now you took it a little deeper. What caused the autoimmune issues? Was it the standard American diet could cause these autoimmune issues, which could cause diabetes type 1.5?
well, don't let's not point our fingers to SAD here, but there's
Could.
also things that we do, like the
Right,
environment,
right,
like
right.
right.
Could. The air, the water, yeah,
Yes,
yeah, and could, because this isn't always going to happen.
right,
That's why I said
correct,
could. Okay,
correct.
so what do you do if someone has type 1 diabetes?
So, type 1 diabetes, as I mentioned to you, Steve, the heart of that condition is actually needing insulin because they cannot produce their own insulin anymore. So, insulin is one of the better approaches there. But type 2 interventions can also help, which I think you will also ask me in a bit.
Yeah. Okay, so you said can also help, but if you have type 1 diabetes, right now the solution is you have to take insulin. Is that right?
Most of the time, yes.
Because you don't have it in your body.
Right, Right. Now
Okay.
you might have a little bit, but not enough for your body to be disease free.
Right. Can't push the energy into the cells. So,
Mm-hmm. Correct.
okay. So let's say type 2. Now, I know there's a lot of variables here. We talked a little bit about it before we turned the camera on. So, type 2 diabetes, I know you could talk for an hour on what you can do about
Mm-hmm.
this, but give us some brief bullet points on what you can do if you have type 2 diabetes.
See, type two. We actually start with the basics here. Again, there's food. As we all know, we focus more on the diet of low glycemic index foods, which actually is a term that when you eat this type of food, it actually delivers carbohydrates in your system very slow to not push that insulin so high because insulin, again, is one of the culprits here, especially when you have insulin resistance. So examples of this would be less processed food, like brown rice, sweet potatoes, yams, even vegetable pastas. So anything that is not processed. And opposite to that is high glycemic index foods, which are actually faster to be distributed to the body to spike that insulin so fast that you actually aggravate diabetes. And these are what we call, sorry, the processed food, such as white rice, the sweets, the candies, the junk food. All of these are processed to increase that specific problem. So diet is actually one, and of course, who doesn't know about exercise? So exercise, we've always been talking about that in our segments here, and so recommendations would be at least 40 to 60 minutes, at least 3 or 4 times a week, in order for you to increase that heart rate and burn calories. And of course, lifestyle. Lifestyle is something that we always want to work on. Less stress, because when you have higher stress, more cortisol, more blood sugar excretion from your body, and now again, aggravation of the problem. So, this intervention, as I mentioned to you, are basics for diabetes number two. But if diabetes number one applies this, definitely it will always help. And maybe later on, I can give you some tips specifically on supplements.
Okay. So just trying to make sure that our audience understands all this as we go. Type 2 diabetes is very different because your body is producing insulin, maybe even too much, and you're insulin resistant. So,
Mm-hmm.
type 1, your body is not producing insulin. And
Mm-hmm.
the same results occur for two different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay, so the lifestyle changes that you mentioned are going to be a benefit to type 1 and type 2 diabetes, changing your lifestyle and getting rid. And you mentioned glycemic index. And if you guys can go, you can look up a glycemic index just about anywhere and see what carbohydrates have a lower glycemic index compared to carbohydrates that have a higher glycemic index. For instance, you mentioned sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are going to have a lower glycemic index than white rice. But
Mm-hmm.
I just know that because I've looked at all these indexes. So,
Right.
very good input. Now, you said you might add something to this. What is that?
Yeah, so in our practice, this is something that we do. I mean, a lot of this would be more for diabetes too, because one, really the heart of that would be you probably want insulin. But don't misconstrue this. Diabetes too also sometimes now is needing insulin, and that's where the 1.5 comes into play. But now to be specific to help our audience here in relation to supplementation. So these are basic supplements that I can actually advise for everyone. But again, not giving medical advice, but this has been proven to be helping diabetes. So cinnamon. What we like here is the Ceylon. Ceylon is very expensive, so I have done it with patients just to buy the regular brand in the grocery store, and two teaspoons a day is something that they can mix because it actually makes your insulin response better. And you can definitely do this also in capsule form, so you're not limited to just doing the powder. Another one is bitter melon. Bitter melon is something that is not really tasting well. If you can take it 20 mils, take it on an empty stomach in the morning, props for you. But if you can't, there's a pill also that you can do it with. Again, promotes insulin production. And another one would be ginseng. So we know this is an adaptogen and increasing the brain functions, libido, but it also has this ability to improve insulin functions. And this has been used so long, even in China, and 3 grams per dose is something that you can consider for this. And the famous alpha lipoic acid, potent antioxidant, both fat and water soluble. And again, it's something that's used as an insulin sensitizer. It's also good for the people who has what we call diabetic neuropathies. So hands, feet that are numb and tingling, 20 to 50 milligrams, they can consider doing that. But if you have neuropathy already, it's a higher dosing, meaning you go up to around 800 milligrams. That's something good. And famous would be chromium as one of the minerals. The higher chromium you get, of course, the more insulin capacity for the cell to be utilizing it. So 200 to 1,000 micrograms, but always, of course, do your supplementations with your doctor's advice. And those are supplements that we give. We also, of course, in our practice, we do detoxification, and a lot of our detoxification are involving IV therapies. So any diabetic is always acidic. So we always make sure that they become alkalinized through like sodium bicarbonate drips. The liver is where the sugar stays or the carbohydrate stays. That's why we liver detox them. And also, it wouldn't be a bad idea to give them nutrients because majority of diabetics needs the vitamin drips because they are all low, most of them. And always with high carbohydrates and sugars, metals are staying in there. So chelation therapy.
Yeah, that is great. Now, just so you all know, we're talking to an integrative physician. So, and you guys, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the comment sections. I always make sure the doctor gets those questions, and he usually gets back and can answer those. But an integrative physician or a functional physician is going to give you more holistic or supplemental or diet changes. They're going to give you those options also and maybe have you try those too. You just have to ask your doctor, but you're going to get these ideas from an integrative physician or a functional physician. So,
Right, Steve. Yeah, I know you're pertaining. There's like metformin, and now there's also like Ozempic, semaglutide. So all of these are the newer forms of prescription medicines. Yes, we use them also, but we're definitely not gonna go for just that because again, you're not going to the heart of the problem. So holistic care is something that we always go for.
sure. And I appreciate that because you can explain this like you might have them use berberine, right? Instead of
Mhm.
metformin or in combination of with metformin. And that's just a natural supplement. So anyway, you guys make your own choices. That's what I love about this is everybody gets to make their own choices with their own health. Your doctor might fire you if he doesn't like your choices, but you get to make them. So uh, thanks for being with us, Dr. Nario.
Yes, Steve, thank you for having me again. Always a pleasure. And it's always something that I always like to share with you, especially I know this is a very complicated and also expansive topic, but hopefully we can get another chance to have part two. This yeah, there's a lot to even with the treatments that I just mentioned a while ago. Those are even yeah the GLP-1s. That's really going really high in the market nowadays. So yeah, that's something that we're going to be talking about.
Wow.
And again, as we all know, oh sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll do diabetes part two. We can do that next week, and that's very interesting on all the different. Oh my goodness, there's so many different ways you can go with diabetes, so many different options, and I think that's what you're hinting at would be a good conversation.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then yeah, well, Steve, thank you again. As we all know, knowledge is power, and thank you for letting me provide you with edge in longevity and health maintenance, which I call the biological edge or the bio edge.
Okay, we'll see y'all next time.